Hi everyone. In this ongoing COVID-19 situation, it's not at all uncommon to be hearing of increases in stress and anxiety in both healthcare and non-healthcare professionals. It's perfectly okay to be feeling anxious, especially in a difficult situation like this one. It's one thing though to be experiencing anxiety, and it's another thing when it interferes in the roles and functioning and it spills over in our everyday life. So my purpose for today was to help you to think about a tool that you may be able to use in times when your anxiety starts getting a little bit out of control. Now, this is not a panacea. This is not a substitute for you, instead of going and seeing a therapist or a doctor or talking to your friends and family. It is simply what it is. It is a tool. Now, the acronym that I want you to remember for this is the word RIPPLE, RIPPLE. You can think of it as ripples of water in your mind, which are eventually going to come down. Each letter, of course, stands for something, which I'm going to get to. The first letter R stands for remember that you're resilient. Now, when we feel anxious, we often feel drained. We feel, I don't have the capacity to do it. I can't seem to find the resources. But I want you to remember that even in that moment, we all have resiliency. It's not that some of us are born with it and some of us don't have it. We all have. Anxiety starts to build. We sometimes start to feel helpless. We feel there's nothing within us that we can turn to help ourselves. But remember, there is something observing that you're anxious, right? If you're having a sensation that I am feeling anxious, there is a part of your mind that which is an observer, it's not so overwhelmed with the emotion that it can't think about what's happening. So we do have part of our mind which we can use to help ourselves. So once again, R stands for remember that you're resilient. The next letter, I, stands for identify the thoughts. Now, emotions don't come without thoughts. We may or may not be aware of it. But when we start to think about what was it that was making me feel anxious, then we become more aware and we can bring it to our conscious mind. So for example, you might, start to think, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What was I feeling anxious about? What was I thinking? And you might remember, oh yeah, I have to go into the hospital tomorrow. I know we have COVID-19 patients. Am I going to fall sick? Am I going to infect my family members with it? Or, you might have a thought, if you're going to be a medical trainee, that, is your, health going to be affected? Is your training going to be affected? The point is you're going to be aware of what thoughts you were having when you started to feel anxious. And once you start to identify and catch those thoughts, that's your tool to start to help yourself to feel better. So I stands for identify the thoughts. Letter P stands for pausing the fear-based messages from the amygdala. Now, a natural effect of what happens when you start to observe your thoughts and identify your thoughts is that you're weakening those fear-based messages which are otherwise overwhelming you and overwhelming your ability to think. So the first P stands for pausing the fear-based messages from the amygdala. The second P is also a natural corollary of you starting to observe your thoughts, and that is empowering your prefrontal cortex. Because the other thing that naturally starts to happen is now your rational brain is starting to think, oh, I'm feeling anxious. What was I anxious about? So now you're going to be able to identify and catch those thoughts so that you can change those thoughts. So basically, you're empowering the prefrontal cortex, which is the second P. As those fear-based messages from the amygdala are reducing and your prefrontal cortex is beginning to think straight, you move to the next letter L, which stands for leverage your prefrontal cortex. So once your rational thinking brain is working, you can use it in two ways. One is transform that worry into taking care. Anything that we are concerned about, we can either worry about it and that's draining, or we can choose to look at it as, okay, I'm concerned about something. Is this something I need to be concerned about? And instead of worrying, what can I do? What have I done? And what can I do to continue to take care of the situation? So going back to the example, so if you're a healthcare worker where you're worried about what's going to happen when you go into work, you need to remind yourself, right, as long as you're taking the necessary precautions, following the WHO, CDC, your hospital, clinic, wherever you work, the guidelines, of that institution, situation, and as long as you know that you're checking off the boxes and you're doing everything possible to make sure that you're being careful, then you need to remind your mind and feed that back into your mind that, okay, I am doing A and B and C and D, so I'm not going to worry. I am doing whatever is in my hands to take care. So that is the first aspect of leveraging your brain, is to transform worry into taking care. The second aspect of leveraging your your prefrontal cortex is to remind yourself of what your purpose is to go into work. Or for example, if you're a trainee in the healthcare industry, to remind yourself of why is it that you want to be a learner in this field. And when we remember the intent, when we remember our purpose in life, very, very often that helps us to become grounded, and it takes away the over anxious part of whatever it is that we were feeling. There's a story from an ancient Indian Sanskrit text that I would love to bring in here to illustrate this point. The story goes that there was this brave, courageous warrior called Arjun. After many years of his cousins being deceitful and cruel, he had decided that he had to wage a war against them. As he went into the battlefield, he started to feel dejected and he started to feel bad because he didn't want to fight his cousins. He had tried to resist it for a long time. He started to have a dialogue with his charioteer, and his charioteer explained this to him. He said, Arjun, you are a warrior at heart. Even if you choose to not fight the battle and go into the jungle, the warrior instincts will come out, and that he would find that he would be playing a warrior role even in the jungle. Also, there was a chance that should he withdraw into the jungle, he may feel bad about not having played his role well and not having fulfilled his duty and not standing up and fighting for justice, which is what the war was about. The story proceeds that Arjun did decide to face the war and fight it, and he and his brothers finally won. The point is, we all have our roles to play in life, and when we remember our reasons and why we are doing something, it helps us to feel grounded and often takes away the dejection and anxiety that we feel. For those of you in the healthcare field who have to make very, very important decisions right now about who to save and who to not save, this hopefully may be helpful for you to apply as you're making decisions. If you remember your intent and you remember the necessity and the reasons that drove you to take the decisions that you did, I hope that you're not left with too much emotional baggage after all this is over. Another aspect to keep in mind about how to play our role is remember that we are responsible only for the roles we play. Especially in the current situation, when we start to look at what's happening, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and dejected with the numbers and statistics, and it's difficult to not think about how things could have been different had certain things been in place. But focusing on what's wrong and what could have been really doesn't help us to bring out our best. In those kinds of situations, once again, it's best to identify those thoughts and catch our thoughts and remind ourselves that irrespective of what's happening around us, we cannot control others' decisions and reactions, but we can definitely play our role and make the situation a little better. The last letter E stands for stay engaged. Stay engaged with your friends, family, social support, neighbors, peers, workplace people, whoever you feel comfortable with. Using audio-visual means that are safe and comfortable for you, especially at the current time, given that we have physical restrictions. That can go a long way in helping to keep our mood calm. The other aspect of staying engaged is stay engaged with your creative self. Bring out that creative self, whatever hobbies you have, whether it's cooking, yoga, hiking. There's so many online activities available now. There's online group cooking classes that one can connect to with your friends and family. Use and think about and do anything creative that can help you. The last aspect of staying engaged is stay engaged with the kindness within you. Think about thoughtful, kind things that you can do for anyone, whether it's family, neighbors, if you're going into the workplace, then people in your workplace, or even people like the postal care worker or delivery people who are risking their lives and coming and delivering things to you. Just doing that one act of kindness once in a while can go a long way in helping us to elevate our mood. being in touch with your creative, kind, healthy self, it's less likely that even if you're alone, you're going to feel lonely. There's a big difference between being alone and feeling lonely. So remember that, being kind, doing good acts, doing thoughtful things, keeping in touch with family members goes a long, long way to help us to calm our mind. So hopefully this acronym RIPPLE will help you at some time in future. And remember, if your thoughts and feelings are so extreme that you feel that you just can't manage by yourself, please reach out to your local warm helpline, to your crisis line, or call 911 if it is very urgent. I hope this has been helpful. I wish you all the very best in the near and distant future. Thank you.